complexity of the offer, first-time offer, has to match the complexity of the core offer. And so as we started breaking it down, a couple of the extra ingredients that we added to it was we realized that there should be a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 5 deliverables.
Hey everyone, this is Mark DeGrasse, the president of Digital Marketer, and this is the podcast that keeps you up to date on everything you need to know when it comes to digital marketing, from the platforms you can be focused on to the cutting-edge tactics and tools that are working today. Today, our guest is Craig Andrews, the principal ally with Allies for Me. He actually has a wealth of experience as one of our M3 members here at Digital Marketer. One of his claims to fame is actually taking a company from $18 million to $60 million all in 18 months before getting unceremoniously fired, because that's what people do to marketers. We'll talk about that. Welcome, Craig.
Mark, it's such a delight to be here. I've been looking forward to this. Excited to talk today.
That's fantastic. So I figured we talk today about what you gave the speech on during our mastermind last week, which was the podcasting, basically how you worked with your wife in order to get on. How many was it? Was it 50 podcasts or?
It's like 53 podcasts in 2 months.
That's incredible, because that's, everybody talks about kind of the podcasting as a marketing strategy is actually relatively new. So why don't you just walk through kind of why you decided you wanted to get on a bunch of podcasts and then kind of how you went about doing it?
Yeah, so it goes all the way back to our prior Triple M meeting, mastermind. And Lauren was talking about doing that and how she was, her goal was to get on 100 podcasts before the end of the year. And I was like, honestly, I was just like, well, that sounds like a good goal. We'll just shoot for that. And so I asked her a couple of questions, and she told me about Podmatch, which was an amazing element of the equation. But some of this had started actually a couple of years ago. I'd gone through Pete Vargas's program, Scale to Stage or Stage to Scale, I forget which it is, but I'd actually been on his program. I'd put together a speaker page, and I'd finished all that up in June, July of 2021. And then July 31st, 2021, woke up deathly ill with COVID. And when I say deathly ill, went into the hospital. They put me on the ventilator. They told my wife, he's going to die. He's not going to make it. You need to meet with hospice. And so that all got put on pause. And, 2022, I came back to work January 3rd, 2022, and I was weak. I would work for a few hours and then take a nap, work for a few more hours, take a nap. And so a lot of 2022, I just didn't have the energy. I didn't have the strength to do it. And then the last mastermind, Lauren was talking about that. I was like, well, heck, I'll just copy her goal. I'll set out to do 100. And so went on Podmatch, and I was talking to my wife. My wife had been laid off. She used to be a Salesforce administrator for NCR. And I said, hey, can you help get me booked on podcast? And she's like, yeah. And so she actually, she did something, here's the secret sauce. She sat down and read some blogs about how to get booked on podcasts and how to not make it all about you, how to appeal to the host. And so I set up a profile on Podmatch, and she started working it. And before we knew it, it just started happening. And to us, that just seemed normal. I don't think it was until, I was talking to the folks at the last mastermind. They're like, so what are you doing? I was like, getting booked on podcasts. And how many? Well, 53 in 2 months. They're like, what? And everybody, the reaction to that just really surprised me. I called her up. I said, hey, by the way, apparently what you're doing, you do it really well. And that's what everybody's telling me. I've been happy with that. But it was really, we just set out and started doing it, and happy with the results. Been booked on top 1% podcasts, and I've been booked on some that are not top 1%. But it's been a really neat journey.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, it's so funny because sometimes when you start doing things, specifically in marketing, you'll find it in any industry, but like the person who just doesn't know any better and just hits the pavement and like, oh no, they told me to get on podcasts. So I went and I got on all these podcasts and they're like, oh my gosh. I think there's a tendency of people to think like there's some automated system or there's some method or there's something that magic that has to happen, a formula that has to happen for you to actually achieve these awesome things. Like 53 podcasts in 2 months is incredible. It's especially different podcasts. And, because I could say like, I did 50 podcasts for Digital Marketer, but I make them. So it's not as significant. So that is fantastic. And I think I saw, did you show some of the emails that she would send and kind of let's walk through that because, you always say, don't make it all about me, which is not obvious to people. Because a lot of times when people go think about podcasts, you're like, oh, well, I want to impress them with how much stuff I've done and how many things that I've achieved and why I'm so special, essentially. Whereas what you guys did was actually focus on what the podcaster was doing. So I want to just walk through kind of that intro letter that you talked about.
Yeah. So the first paragraph is basically praising them for what they do. Every podcaster has a mission. Figure out what that mission is. Tell them you're glad that they're pursuing that mission. Hopefully you agree with that. If you don't agree with it, you probably shouldn't be on the podcast. But you agree with the mission, praise it. So that's the first paragraph. And then here's the part everybody wants to skip. Like you said, they want to automate this. And this is the thing you can't automate. So when my wife identifies a podcast that she thinks I'll be good on, she listens to it. She listens and she takes notes while she's listening. So the second paragraph in the outreach is, hey, Mark, I heard, that podcast that you have with Craig, on blah, blah, on getting on podcasting. And, this one thing he said really stuck with me. That's the second paragraph. Actually talk about a specific podcast with a specific guest and a specific takeaway from that podcast. Doing that alone sets you so far apart because I've had hosts just tell me, they're like, and they've mentioned my wife's name. They're like, hey, Karen did a great job. I don't know if they know she's my wife. They may think she's some agent, but they tell me, they were like, Karen did a great job. And they outline what she did. I mean, this was on a podcast that had been booked like a month earlier, but it made such an impression on them. And so if you do those two things, that's going to set you far apart from the crowd. And it's going to improve your odds. And, I have one podcast where I've had a few people tell me this, say, Craig, we get 50 to 100 pitches a week to be on our podcast. That's the noise you have to rise above. Think about that, 50 to 100 pitches per week, and you've got to bust through that noise. You're not going to do that with an automated system.
Oh, no, well, that's an understatement because I get that too, where we have our, requests to be on the podcast. And a lot of times I don't even look at them because I talk to enough people where I could fill my entire podcast schedule with people I personally met and decided that, oh, you're good for the show and come on the show. And so, and I do get a million pitches, just through my email where they're like, oh, well, I work with this company and just so everybody knows, when I get a third party email, from somebody and they're like, oh, John's so great and he should be on your show, I've tried to book them because I was like, well, let me see, let me see if this works out. Half of the time the person doesn't show up. And so not only is that method kind of flawed in the first place because it's very impersonal, but a lot of times those people who hired that podcast company to get them guesting aren't even serious about it in the first place. And so now, as a podcaster, I'm like, I can't trust that because now I scheduled out my week and I have 3 no-shows for a podcast. Like now I'm upset and no, I want to hear it. But when I do get an email like that, I always look for like, is any of this personal to me? Because if it's not, I'm assuming that you're bulk blasting out a bunch of podcasts and that's it. And so now I don't trust you personally because you're just doing this for yourself. And that doesn't mean anything to me. So right off the bat, I'll say that the fact that she listens to the podcast and just said, and listen to the podcast and quotes an episode. I mean, no podcaster could resist that because it means that somebody actually listened to what you said, which is while you're doing it. So that's incredible. Now, did she have experience, like, I don't know, connecting or networking? Because that's like a key networking skill that she displayed.
I mean, she loves people. She loves people. You know, I mean, she was a full-time mom raising her kids. You know, that got into the workforce late. You know, she got married young, had kids young, and you know, this is like totally off topic, but hiring managers out there, if you want to find like the most incredible workers ever, find stay-at-home moms returning to the workforce.
Mm.
The skills they bring, you know, they've had to manage schedules, manage budgets, do conflict resolution, you know, all sorts of things. They're just amazingly responsible people. And if you give them a job, they think you're a hero because they don't think anybody wants to hire them. And, you know, I've been telling my wife that for years, but that's what you're seeing. You're just saying, you know, what school do you go to? What class do you take to just learn some of these basic skills? These have been built into her for years. And she's tenacious. You know, I think I told you when I had COVID and they put me on the ventilator, and this was a time when they were telling families they couldn't visit their sick family members. Well, I have pictures of my wife in my room while I'm on the ventilator. She did not take no for an answer. Thank goodness she did, because I don't think I'd be here today if she hadn't done that.
No. Thank goodness for tenacious wives, because mine's the same way. You know, it's kind of like, oh, you could try to stop her. I wouldn't, because she will figure it out, and you'll feel silly. So that's fantastic. And it really takes that kind of attitude to, you know, make things happen, because, you know, if you are going to use marketing or use podcasting as a marketing method, like I'm going to guest, I'm building up my authority, I'm getting my message out to the world, and I'm getting it out on a bunch of unique platforms that are dedicated to a similar space. So now it's all relevant audiences. It's a killer marketing method. So just in that regards, what has, going on so many podcasts, because I'm sure you've done more than 50 now, done for your business or for your kind of personal brand?
Well, it's been really good in terms of, one, it's just opened up other audiences. And if I were to break it down to the biggest impact, so we'll talk about this later. We have this thing we call a first time offer. We've been talking about this for a few years now, and people hear it and they're like, sounds interesting, but no real excitement. And I think some of it is we were just talking to the wrong audiences. And so as I've talked to podcasts, as I've gone on podcasts, the response has just been overwhelming. Now, some of that may be because the economy is a little bit funny, and these things really help in a bad economy. But it's really energized me, and it's having me kind of make minor, some course adjustments to how we're doing outreach, how we're driving the business, because we realize, here's something that's really, really nice, solves a big need. But we do inbound marketing, and so do thousands of other people. And so here's something that's really unique that helps raise us out of the noise, and actually help people solve a real problem for them. And so the audience is just expanding. I was on the phone this morning with somebody from Australia in Perth, and we're working that. That was an audience that was never available to me before. It was available, but I hadn't tapped into it. And so that's kind of been the impact. I've had podcasters where they finish the interview, they stop recording, and then they look at me and they say, "Craig, I need that.
Could you help me?"
Yeah. It's delightful, because all of a sudden, what'd you have? You just had a conversation. You didn't take them through your sales pitch. You had a conversation. They realize, oh my goodness, he has something that will help me. Let's talk. And it's just wonderful.
I hate to interrupt our podcast, but I have an announcement about Digital Marketer's content certification. Content without a content marketing strategy is an expensive mistake, but it's one that most businesses are making. When it comes to content marketing, all content should be created with a clear purpose to move a customer or potential customer along the customer value journey. That's why you need Digital Marketer's Content Mastery certification. You'll learn how to leverage a complete content system to strategize, create, and distribute content that just plain works. When you become a certified content marketing strategist, you'll master the craft of systematically creating and promoting content that drives noticeable revenue for any business, and you'll get a badge to prove it. Learn more right now at digitalmarketer.com/content-cert. Well, it's fantastic because you're already talking about it. You obviously have a wealth of information, that they could, consume as they're asking you questions during a podcast. And now it's even more validated because they brought you on specifically for that. Why wouldn't they use you? And it's an elevator for the podcast. If I have you on the show and I'm like, you're amazing and I need that service, I recommend that service, and then I'm using the service, now you can sell everybody else on it by, sharing the episode. And be like, of course I'm using him. Here's why. It's a good loop because it all is reinforcing that you're the expert, that you're the one with the answers, that, of course, the podcast host is using you because you convinced him during the podcast. So I love that. And it's actually a reversal of what we've talked about before on the show, which is using your podcast as a host to vet prospects. So the reverse of that, where it's like, okay, well, say, you're a local marketer, you work with, contracting companies, residential contracting companies, and you have a podcast that's just about residential contracting business. And so you go out to a roofer and say, hey, I have this podcast. You're the best roofer in the city. Could you please come on my podcast and just talk about roofing and how you get out there? And essentially what you're doing is you're, doing a prospect meeting with your guest to get the business. But the reverse is true too. You could do it like you're doing it, where you are convincing the host, on top of the fact that you get the exposure and everything else. So all of it's genius.
Yeah. No, it's really neat. There's another component, when, talking about kind of the success, I think is important not to miss. And, 60 Minutes, the television show or the news show, historically, it just had this fantastic run as an overwhelmingly popular news show. And years ago, this is probably 15, 20 years ago, I was listening to somebody talk about, what made that successful. And the original producer of the show said, I have one rule: tell me a story. So as you're thinking about going on different podcasts, well, guess what? I mean, let's say you're a marketer and you're trying to go on podcasts because you want people to hire you as a marketer. Okay, let's be honest. There's a lot of people that do what you do, even if you're exploiting a little bit of a niche. I've been listening to a few people recently, and I'm like, I hear them say something, and I'm like, I think that came from Dan Kennedy, and so we're, it's funny. I'd love to build a tree of knowledge and see who are at the base of the tree. But you find people like Dan Kennedy that feed all these different marketers, including myself. And so if I say something that I learned from Dan Kennedy, or if I learned from Digital Marketer, guess what? There's thousands of other people that have also heard that. It's not really differentiating. And so you're in a space that's fundamentally not differentiated if you're a marketer. Well, what can differentiate you is your ability to tell a story. And that makes the podcast entertaining. I mean, as a host, I'm sure you want more subscribers to your podcast. You want more people listening to that. And if your plan is to go on a podcast and just, say, hey, let me tell you these methods and metrics and blah, 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 that's going to be boring. People are going to just stop listening. And your hosts, I assume, I don't know, I'm speaking for you. You tell me, do you want our stories powerful?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the story is the most entertaining part because I'm having you on the show because I know you're a professional. So we could get over you need to convince me that you're a professional because you won't be in the show otherwise. So what we're doing now is how do we convince people of your unique approach to whatever? And honestly, I don't care where you got the information because if I learn it from you specifically, you're now the teacher. I don't care about anything else. I'm not going to go, oh, well, Craig said this. Let me go look it up and find out who really came up with that. I don't care because we're talking about application of ideas rather than the ideas themselves, which are valuable. But my thing is always about applications, because you could have the best idea in the world, but if you're not able to execute it or get some kind of benefit from it, then who cares? There's no evidence specifically for you of whether it works or not. So the story component, story and evidence, and you're entertaining makes a huge difference too, because you could be super informed and you could be a genius and you could come off like a jerk and it still won't matter. You just, cured cancer on the show, but you kind of sound mean. So now, you made my audience feel bad and nothing else matters besides that. So no, you are completely right. Story matters. And that entertaining factor matters, because I could go read a book. We all have the answers. They're all free online.
Right.
You need to convince me of it. That's really your job as a marketer. But between that and then, we also talked about kind of before the show is that, when you're going on these podcasts, like the reason, of course, is to build up authority, generate awareness with unique audiences, connect with the host if they're, a potential partner or even a client. But, at the end of the day, if you don't have a call to action, which is what we always talk about within our content marketing frameworks, is then there's no point to it, or there's no trackable point to it. So let's kind of talk about that. So you're on all these podcasts. Do you usually close with an offer, or how do you get people from listening to you on the podcast to becoming an audience member?
Yeah. So we have an offer, and a lot of the podcasts we're talking about this process that we have called first time offers for high ticket sales. And guess what? The offer is, hey, we have a guide and we have 23-day access to a course to help you do just this. Go to this link. By the way, we always make a custom branded link for the podcast. And I had a host say, I like that. You're helping me promote my brand. That's back into that. But yeah, that's the call to action. We have that at the end. It's good as a marketer because guess what? All these links have tracking information. So when people can come in, we can figure out, what drove them. So yeah, always call to action.
That's fantastic. Now, in regards to, say, your first time offer, can you walk me through kind of, why you call it a first time offer versus a, I don't know, tripwire or a high trust offer, whatever it is, and kind of how you formulate that in relation to your core offer?
Yeah. So tripwire or entry point offer, I think your audience is very familiar with that. So I set out originally trying that, and I put together I think this is right when, Ryan and Digital Marketer were transitioning away from the term tripwire, which is probably a good move. You want to look at your audience.
People up.
No, yeah. Well, by the way, side note, we've banished the term lead magnet. Mm-hmm. We don't use that term because it's too mercenary and it puts us in the wrong mindset. So we call them conversation starters. That's our term for it. And I do it for me more than I do it for anyone else, because when I think about that, it helps keep my mind focused on the right attitude and the right content, instead of saying, oh, hey, there's a prospect. But anyway, I started off back in 2017 saying, okay, I'm going to build a tripwire for my business. And I built one. It failed horribly. Nobody understood it. Nobody wanted it. Nobody bought it. And then my next offer, it failed. The one after that failed, but a little less than the prior two. And about 18 months in, they started working reliably. And what I found was, again, your audience knows it has to be an impulse purchase, disproportionate value to price, has to solve a problem, has to leave problems unsolved, and has to naturally lead to the next step. I'm pretty sure your audience knows all those things. Where it was failing for us was we do a high ticket, high trust service. And I realized, okay, I can't do 13 albums for a penny or the equivalent of that, the old Columbia House offer. I can't do that for a complex service, that the complexity of the offer, first time offer, has to match the complexity of the core offer. And so as we started breaking it down, a couple of the extra ingredients that we added to it was we realized that there should be a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 5 deliverables. Those 3 to 5 deliverables should represent 3 to 5 milestones that move your customer 3 to 5 steps closer to where they want to be. And the reason, less than 3 feels underwhelming, more than 5 is overwhelming. And, I think you were the one who said last week, it's popular saying a confused brain does not purchase. And so you don't want to have too many. The other thing we found was that one of the deliverables needs to be the product of a co-working session where the customer feels like they primarily contributed to those deliverables. There's a guy named Marcus who calls it fingerprinting, putting their fingerprints on that. But when that happens, you trigger a couple cognitive biases. One's the IKEA effect, the other's the endowment effect, where all of a sudden they start valuing it more. But when you get to the end and moving forward, for them not to move forward would require that they reject their own ideas.
Yeah, love that.
So that's one of the things we discovered. And the other thing we discovered, and this is going to sound really complicated, I promise I will immediately simplify it. The final deliverable has to be the solution to a problem that's uniquely created by the successful delivery of the preceding deliverables. Okay, that's a lot of words. That's confusing. Let's talk boats. If you buy a boat, you have a new problem. You need a place to store the boat. So if I sold boats for a living, if somebody walked on my boatyard saying, I want to buy a boat, I would say, we're going to find the perfect boat for you. But once you find it, you've got a new problem. They actually have a lot of new problems, but we're just going to talk about one.
It's the biggest one.
Yeah. You're going to need a place to dock this boat. And guess what? We have relationships with all the marinas in the area, all the yacht clubs in the area. We know their prices. We'll make the introductions. As a matter of fact, if you want, we will have the boat delivered to your slip. So all you have to do is show up with your family, with your picnic basket and your cooler, get on your boat and have a fantastic time. So when you do that, it moves their frame of reference. They're no longer looking at buying an expensive boat. You just moved them over to the other side to a framework of success where they're actually picturing themselves getting on the boat and having a magnificent day. At that point, it's going to be hard not to sell them a boat.
Man, that's genius, and it's a different level of complexity, which, really with marketing, I think we need that because I think with one of the issues we have just as a profession is that everybody thinks they get what we do immediately, even though they really have no idea, but the perception is that they do. So with your offer format, you're actually, going a much higher level and much, like you're saying, the complexity that you're adding to it shows evidence of your understanding of what's going on and then is reflected in your core offer, which then all leads to each other. But I love the idea that they're actually generating the problems and the ideas themselves, which lead to the need for more solutions, which you then provide. So it's
right.
I'd say that's next level lead generation because most of us are just kind of like, well, if I get enough leads, I'll get some good ones in there, right? I mean, that's that's what we focus on. But plus, it's a reporting thing because if we have a client, they don't care that we're saying like, no, you just need the right leads. And most people are like, no, I just need more leads, and so it's kind of this balance between like providing good leads and then providing the volume leads that people expect. That way, everybody wins. You stay employed as a marketer, plus they get the results they want and they get the perception of the process that they expect. But from just a professional standpoint, I think that's genius way to do it. And it's hard though. Nobody wants to hear 18 months of lead magnet testing.
Yeah. And it's Well, and we found it's really hard to put the offers together. And it's really interesting. The number one, when we're in a workshop, we do one-on-one customer client workshops to help them build their offers. The number one challenge that I see is getting them out of a mindset of sales and into a mindset of service. And it actually takes me about 2 hours to move their mindset into that service mentality. But when I get them there, the offers that come out are just amazing. I mean, there was one time I finished up a workshop and I was driving home. I called my wife. I said, if somebody turned down this offer, they would have to be clinically insane.
Love it.
But the only way you get there is thinking about serving. And, and that's a problem, because if you have a business, I mean, we just have this wiring where we got to sell, we got to sell, we got to sell. And that ends up being a big, big barrier. I mean, obviously, yes, the end of the road better be the cash register ringing. But I'm telling you, the fastest way there is to quit trying to sell.
Love that. Well, yeah, you're not trying to sell. You're trying to solve a problem. That's
it.
That's it. And if you're doing that, then of course you'll make money from it. But
yeah.
if anybody sniffs around and is like, wait, you're just doing this to sell me something, even though why else would you be having a prospect call or, an introductory call other than to sell something? But, it's managing the process, the expectations, and then providing value, which is really what you're talking about. It's not about making the sale. It's about solving a problem, giving people that value that you uniquely are able to deliver because you have this system and this experience and there's all these things in place. And now, of course, you'll hire me for this, because where else are you going to get all of this stuff in one place? And we've just talked for 2 hours about it. So obviously,
Right.
I love all that. It's kind of, I think this is a different subject. We can definitely keep going on this. And I think we'll have you back on the show soon just to talk about offers and kind of offer construction, because that's an entirely new approach. And it's something that I think it's easy to kind of have your lead magnet and moving on. You don't talk about that, especially in relation to what you're actually presenting online, and all of it needs to be connected. Otherwise, like you were, I did not say that. That was probably Ryan Dice. It sounds like a Ryan Dice thing, that confused mind doesn't buy, which is genius, and I'm going to use it. But definitely a Ryan thing. I'm more, everything I talk to relates back to content, where I'm like, oh yeah, well, your content has to reflect your lead magnet and that has to reinforce your pitch and blah, 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 blah. But this has been fantastic. So once again, congrats, 53 podcast guest spots in 2 months is incredible. Congratulate your wife for me as well, because that's super impressive and I'm jealous. And now I want to talk to my wife about getting me podcast spots because she's the same way. But huge achievement. And again, I really like your offer approach. So we'll definitely have to have you back on the show for that. In the meantime, where can people learn more about you and maybe see where you're podcasting?
Yeah. So come to alliesforme.com. That's spelled ALLIES, the number 4, ME.com. And and if somebody wants to learn more about this, like I said, I screwed it up for a long time. I made a lot of mistakes. So I built a guide to help folks avoid some of the mistakes that I made. And we also have 23-day access to a course. Just for clarity, the reason we do the 23-day access is we're in the business of changing lives. And I don't want you to sign up for some free course that you put on some back shelf next to the dusty free course that you signed up for, last year. We want you to use this. So we put that time limit on there because we see it in the analytics. You'll actually show up and do it, put it to work. It will change your life. That's what we want. So you get there by going alliesforme.com/digital marketer, all lowercase, all one word.
Fantastic. Love the custom link and the call to action. So again, kind of demonstrating what you're good at and being consistent about it, which I love about marketing and talk about on the show all the time. So thank you, Craig. And thank you for being an M3 member as well.
Mark, this has been a delight. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And thank you for listening. Be sure to hit that follow button so you get notified when all of our new episodes release. Please share this with that friend who is clueless about digital marketing. And don't forget to visit digitalmarketer.com where you can access all of our courses, certifications, and training programs. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you next time.